The galaxy's comfortable Ladar Mirren stood in the crystalline observation dome of Valora Prime's highest academy, watching the twin moons rise over the city of eternal learning. Below her, millions of Valorans moved through their peaceful lives, studying ancient texts, creating art that made the soul weep, and raising children in a society that had not known violence for 3 centuries. The Valoran civilization was built on knowledge, beauty, and a simple philosophy: peace at any price. That price had always been paid in resources, minerals, technology, cultural artifacts. Whatever the aggressive empires demanded as tribute. The Galactic Concordance, that grand alliance of 847 species, had codified this arrangement. Peaceful species paid protection tribute to aggressive ones, and in return, they were left alone to pursue their scholarly and artistic endeavors. It was efficient. It was logical. It was, the Concordance insisted, the only way to maintain stability across a galaxy filled with species at vastly different evolutionary stages. Mirren had served on the tribute.
The council for 80 years.
Longer than most Valorans could stomach the work. She had negotiated with the Zarkonian Empire, the Cathral Dominion, and a dozen other warrior cultures. She had watched the tribute demands grow year after year, from 10% of their planetary output to 30, then 50. She had argued, compromised, and ultimately surrendered, piece after piece of Valoran dignity. But they had kept the peace. Their children had grown up never knowing fear, never hearing the sound of weapons fire, never seeing cities burn. That was worth any price, wasn't it? The Concordance certainly thought so. Their representatives visited annually to remind the Valorans of how fortunate they were. How many species had been exterminated before the tribute system was established. How enlightened they all were now. But tonight, Mirren watched the city with a growing dread that had been building for months. The latest Zarkonian demand had arrived 3 days ago, delivered by Supreme Commander Thrax himself aboard a warship so large it had cast a shadow over half the planet. The demand was different this time. Not resources. Not technology. People. Specifically, 10,000 Valoran children between the ages of 5 and 12. To be taken to Zarkonian space for what they called cultural integration programs. Mirren had read the proposal with hands that shook so badly she could barely hold the data tablet. The language was diplomatic, wrapped in talk of mutual understanding and cross-species education. But she had seen the files from other species who had accepted similar arrangements. The children never returned. They were brainwashed, trained as soldiers or servants, their identities erased and replaced with Zarkonian loyalty. It was slavery dressed in bureaucratic language, and the Concordance was prepared to approve it. The emergency session of the Valoran High Council had lasted 18 hours. Mirren had stood before her colleagues and begged them to refuse, to find another way to do anything but surrender their children. The response had been unanimous and devastating. They would comply. Council Speaker Thren had delivered the decision with tears streaming down his crystalline face. But his voice never wavered. We cannot fight the Zarkonians. We have no weapons, no military, no way to defend ourselves. If we refuse, they will take not 10,000 children, but all of them. They will destroy our cities, burn our libraries, end our civilization. At least this way, some of our children survive. At least this way, Valora endures. The vote was 47-3. Mirren had been one of the 3 who voted no. The other 2 had already resigned from the council in protest. Choosing exile over complicity, Mirren remained because she had one final card to play, though it might cost her everything. She waited until the administrative wing of the academy was empty, and used her council access codes to enter the Forbidden Archive. The room was small, environmentally sealed, and contained exactly 73 data cores. Each one held information on species classified as too dangerous for general contact. Deathworlders. Civilizations that had evolved on planets so hostile that simply surviving required constant violence. The Galactic Concordance quarantined these worlds, watching from a distance, waiting for them to destroy themselves or evolve beyond their aggressive natures. Most death worlds never achieved space travel. Their species killed themselves off before reaching the stars. But a few made it, and when they did, they brought their savage instincts with them. Mirren searched through the classifications until she found the highest danger rating, Class 13. Only one species had ever been classified that high. Earth. The file was extensive. Compiled by Concordance observation teams over 10,000 years of watching humanity's development. She read it with growing horror and something else hope. The humans had survived ice ages that would have ended most civilizations. They had hunted megafauna to extinction, then learned to domesticate the predators that once hunted them. They'd created agriculture in environments where nothing should grow. They had fought wars so brutal that entire continents became graveyards, then somehow found ways to cooperate long enough to reach the stars. Their planet tried to kill them with hurricanes, earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions. And they just adapted and kept going. The psychological profile was what caught Myron's attention. Humans had something the Concordance called protective rage syndrome. When their young were threatened, humans became essentially irrational, willing to sacrifice themselves without hesitation. This instinct was so powerful that it extended beyond their own species. Humans would risk their lives to save animals, plants, even artificial intelligences they considered under their protection. The Concordance observers had documented hundreds of cases. Throughout human history of individuals charging into burning buildings, diving into flooded rivers, or confronting armed threats to save children of fun children that weren't even their own. The analysis concluded that this behavior, while admirable in an abstract sense, made humans fundamentally unpredictable and dangerous. They could not be reasoned with when they believed innocents were threatened. They could not be negotiated with using standard diplomatic frameworks. They simply acted, often suicidally. Driven by emotions the more evolved species had long since suppressed, Myron made her decision. She drafted a message, keeping it simple and direct. Humans appreciated honesty according to the cultural files. She included the Zarkonian demand, the Concordance's approval, the coordinates of Valora Prime. Then she added one final paragraph. They are taking our children. We have paid for peace with everything we have, our resources, our pride, our dignity. Now, they want our future. The galaxy tells us this is the price of civilization, that we must accept this or be destroyed. But I cannot accept it. I will not. If anyone hears this who still believes children matter more than politics, who still remembers what it means to fight for something beyond survival, please help us. We have no weapons. We have no military. We have only our knowledge and our desperation. And we have this message. Sent to the one species the galaxy fears most, please, our children are all we have left. She encrypted the transmission using a quantum-locked frequency that would take the Concordance months to trace, then routed it through 17 relay stations before finally beaming it toward Earth's solar system. The message would take 3 years to arrive, traveling at light speed across 40 light-years of empty space. By then, the 10,000 children would be long gone. By then, Myron would probably be dead. The Concordance took a very dim view of species contacting quarantined worlds. But she had done the only thing she could think of. She had called for help from the one place that might actually answer. She had awakened the Deathworlders, Earth's impossible choice Admiral Catherine Kitt. Vance was reviewing supply requisitions when the priority alert interrupted her morning coffee. As commander of Terra Station, humanity's largest orbital facility, she was used to alerts. Rogue asteroids, solar radiation spikes, the occasional diplomatic incident with one of the 3 alien species. Humanity had officially made contact with all in a day's work. But this alert was different. It came from the Deep Space Monitoring Network, the array of satellites humanity had scattered throughout the solar system to watch. For exactly this, signals from unknown sources. She pulled up the file and watched her coffee go cold as she read. The message had taken 3 years to reach Earth, meaning it was sent in 2347. It was now 2350. And humanity had only achieved faster-than-light travel 2 years ago. The technology was still experimental, based on theories about quantum foam manipulation that even the scientists barely understood, but it worked. Humanity could cross light years in days instead of centuries. That meant, for the first time in history, Earth could respond to a distress call from another species. The question was whether they should. Kit forwarded the message to the United Earth Assembly and requested an emergency session. Within 6 hours, she was standing before representatives from every nation and coalition on Earth, projected holographically into the Assembly chamber in Geneva. The debate that followed would be studied by historians for centuries. On one side, the isolationists argued that humanity barely had the resources to maintain its own colonies. Earth was still recovering from the climate wars of the 2290s, when rising sea levels and resource scarcity had nearly destroyed human civilization. They had only achieved global unity 20 years ago, and that unity was fragile. Why risk everything by involving themselves in alien politics? Why make enemies of unknown empires light years away? The pragmatist pointed out that Earth's entire space fleet consisted of 25 ships. If these Zarkonians were as powerful as the message suggested, humanity would be obliterated. Better to stay quiet, stay hidden, and hope the galaxy's problems remained far away. But then General Marcus Stone stood to speak. Stone was 73 years old, a veteran of the climate wars who had spent the last 2 decades building Earth's defense forces from nothing into something that could actually protect humanity's scattered colonies. He was respected by every faction, trusted by all sides, and when he spoke, people listened. "I've been a soldier for 52 years, Stone began, his voice steady and strong despite his age. "I've seen what happens when good people do nothing in the face of evil. I've seen cities drown while politicians debated rescue operations. I've seen children starve while bureaucrats argued about resource allocation. I've seen humanity at its worst, and I've spent my entire adult life trying to help us be better." Stone pulled up the Valoran message on the main display. "This is the test we've been preparing for without knowing it. We spent 200 years learning to be better than our worst instincts. We unified Earth, not because it was easy, but because we decided that survival wasn't enough. We wanted to be worthy of survival. We wanted to be the kind of species that our grandchildren could be proud of. And now, for the first time, we have the ability to help someone beyond our own planet. Someone who needs help desperately. Someone who called out into the void hoping anyone would hear." He paused, looking around the chamber at faces from every culture on Earth. "If we ignore this message, we prove that all our talk about human dignity and universal rights only applies when it's convenient. We prove that we're no different than the empires that oppress them. We become the kind of species that values safety over righteousness." The counter-arguments came fast. Representative Chen from the Asian Coalition pointed out the practical reality. "General Stone, I respect your passion. But we're talking about sending our entire fleet across 40 light-years to confront an empire we know nothing about. The message says 40 Zarkonian warships. We have 25 ships total. How is this not suicide?" Stone's response was simple and devastating. "Because those children don't deserve to die just because saving them is hard. Because if we don't try, we'll spend the rest of human history wondering what kind of species we really are." And because he smiled grimly, the Zarkonians have never fought humans before. They have no idea what they're dealing with. Ambassador Okonkwo from the African Union asked the question everyone was thinking. "General, what do you mean by that?" Stone pulled up a comparative analysis his tactical team had prepared. The Valorans evolved on a Class II world. Low gravity, stable climate, minimal predation. They're scholars and artists because their planet let them be. The Zarkonians evolved on a Class 6 world. Higher gravity, more aggressive fauna. They're warriors because their environment required it. But Earth? He highlighted humanity's homeworld on the display. Earth is Class 13, the highest danger classification. Humanity survived ice ages, supervolcanoes, asteroid impacts, and diseases that killed 90% of our population. We didn't just survive, we thrived. We turned every extinction event into an opportunity to adapt. We learned to hunt in packs, to plan months ahead, to cooperate across genetic and tribal lines. Every military doctrine we've ever developed is based on protecting the vulnerable while defeating stronger opponents. That's what humans do. That's what we're built for. The vote took place at midnight Geneva time. The debate had lasted 14 hours, representatives calling home to consult their governments, their people, their consciences. In the end, the resolution passed with 89% approval. The United Earth Assembly authorized Operation Guardian Angel, the deployment of Earth's entire defense fleet to Valora Prime. Admiral Vance would command. General Stone would serve as strategic advisor, and every crew member would be a volunteer. The message went out within hours. Earth needs volunteers for a mission to save 10,000 alien children from slavery. The journey will take 2 weeks. The battle will be against an empire that outnumbers us. You might not come back. Report to recruitment centers if you're willing to try anyway. The response shocked even the optimists. Within 24 hours, over 2 million people had volunteered. The recruitment centers were overwhelmed. People waited in lines for days, desperate to be chosen. They came from every nation, every background, every walk of life. Soldiers and civilians, young and old, people who had never left Earth, and people who had spent years in space. When journalists asked them why, the answers were remarkably similar. Because someone has to. Because they're children. Because if not us, then who? Kit interviewed the candidates personally, trying to select the 15,000 crew members she would need. Each interview reinforced what she was learning. Humanity had spent 2 centuries learning to be better, and now they wanted to prove it meant something. Among the volunteers was Sergeant James Reeves, a 45-year-old former Child Protective Services investigator who had joined the Marines after his daughter was kidnapped and murdered by human traffickers. He had spent 20 years hunting down predators, rescuing victims, and living with the guilt that he couldn't save his own child. When he heard about the Valoran children, he knew he had to go. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, daughter of the Assembly ambassador, volunteered as a trauma specialist. She had lost her own daughter to a preventable disease during the climate wars. When medical supplies were hoarded by the wealthy, she became a doctor to make sure no other parent felt that helplessness. Captain Lu Chen, one of Earth's best pilots, volunteered immediately. His grandmother had been trafficked from China to North America in the 2150s, sold into slavery, and rescued by people who risked their lives because it was the right thing to do. He knew what humanity owed to those who fought against human traffickers. Now he could pay that debt forward. The fleet prepared for launch in record time. Engineers worked around the clock, installing additional weapons, reinforcing hulls, and optimizing the FTL drives for maximum speed. Medical teams stocked supplies for treating unknown alien physiology. Linguists studied the fragments of galactic common they could extract from the Valoran message, building translation protocols, and the crews trained, running simulations of combat scenarios against opponents they knew nothing about, preparing for a battle that might be their last. Admiral Vance addressed the fleet the night before launch, standing on the observation deck of the flagship Defiant, with Earth hanging beautiful and blue behind her. "I won't lie to you," she said, her voice broadcast to all 25 ships. "This is going to be hard. We're going into unknown space to fight an unknown enemy, to save people we've never met. The galaxy will probably think we're crazy. They might be right." She paused, looking at the faces watching her, thousands of humans who had volunteered to risk everything. "But I think about those children on Valora Prime. I think about their parents watching the Zarkonian ships descend, knowing their babies are about to be taken. I think about the desperation it took for Elder Mirren to send that message, to call for help from a species she'd been taught to fear. And I know we're doing the right thing. Not the safe thing, not the easy thing, but the right thing. That's what makes us human. Not our technology, not our weapons. Our absolute refusal to look away when someone needs help." A fleet launched on April 3rd, 2350, from high Earth orbit. Millions watched from the surface as 25 ships arranged themselves in formation cruisers, destroyers, medical vessels, and support craft, everything humanity had managed to build in 2 short years of space travel. The FTL drives engaged simultaneously, ripping holes in space-time that glowed with impossible colors. And then they were gone, racing across 40 light-years toward a world they'd never seen, to fight for children they'd never met, because that's what humans do. The journey would take 14 days. The battle would last 18 hours, and the galaxy would never be the same. On Valora Prime, Elder Mirren sat in her prison cell, arrested for unauthorized contact with a quarantined species. She had no idea if her message had reached Earth. She had no idea if anyone was coming. But sometimes hope is all you need. In 3 years, 2 months, and 7 days after, she sent her desperate plea into the void. The Deathworlders arrived to answer it. The journey across 40 light-years gave the crew of Operation Guardian Angel 2 weeks to prepare for a battle unlike any in human history. Admiral Catherine Vance used every minute, running the fleet through combat drills that pushed ships and crews to their limits. The FTL travel itself was surreal. Watching normal space compress and distort through viewports as the quantum drives bent reality around them, the scientists called it riding the foam, surfing probability waves through higher dimensions. To the crew, it felt like falling upward forever, accompanied by a low humming that you felt in your bones rather than heard with your ears. Vance spent most of her time in the tactical center of the Defiant, studying everything they knew about the Zarkonians, which wasn't much. The Valoran message had included basic intelligence, warrior culture, heavy use of plasma weapons, ships built for intimidation as much as function. But humanity had fought enough wars to know that good intelligence was the difference between victory and suicide. Sergeant James Reeves ran his Marine boarding teams through close-quarters combat drills in the Defiant's training deck. They practiced with weighted suits that simulated higher gravity, trained with oxygen restrictions to prepare for damaged ships, and rehearsed rescue operations where the hostages might not understand human language or intentions. Reeves pushed them hard, harder than regulations technically allowed, but no one complained. They all knew what was waiting at the end of this journey. During breaks, Reeves would sit alone in the observation lounge, staring at the distorted stars of FTL travel and thinking about his daughter. Emma had been 7 when she was taken, 9 when they found her body. The traffickers had kept her for 2 years before killing her. Reeves had hunted them for 5 more years, bringing every single one to justice. But justice didn't bring Emma back. Nothing brought her back. This mission wouldn't bring her back either. But maybe, just maybe, he could make sure 10,000 other parents didn't feel what he felt. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo set up a field hospital in the medical bay of the support ship Mercy, working with her team to prepare for casualties both human and alien. The challenge was enormous. They had no idea what Valeron physiology looked like beyond the brief descriptions in the message. Crystalline biology with silicon-based compounds, oxygen breathing, roughly humanoid but lighter and more fragile. Sarah had requisitioned every medical scanner and analysis tool Earth had developed, along with supplies for treating burns, radiation exposure, trauma, and a dozen other combat-related injuries. She ran her staff through triage drills, where they had to make impossible decisions about who to save first, knowing that in the chaos of battle, those decisions would be made in seconds. Between shifts, Sarah recorded messages to her mother, the ambassador, knowing she might not return. "Mama, if you're watching this, it means I didn't make it home. I want you to know I'm not afraid. I'm doing exactly what you taught me to do, helping people who need it most. I love you. Tell Dad I'm proud to be his daughter." Captain Lu Chen was one of 25 ship commanders, leading the destroyer Swift Justice as part of the fleet's fast-tack division. At 34, Liu was young for a captain, but he'd proven himself during the Mars colony crisis when pirates tried to hijack medical supplies, and he'd single-handedly disabled 3 pirate ships without firing a shot. Using nothing but creative maneuvering and threats he absolutely would have followed through on. Liu treated his ship like an extension of his body, knowing every system, every crew member, every capability and limitation. He drilled his people relentlessly on evasive maneuvers and precision targeting. "We're going to be outnumbered," he told his crew during one of their daily briefings. "That means we need to be faster, smarter, and more aggressive than anyone expects. The Zarkonians think they're the apex predators. We're going to show them they're wrong." As the fleet traveled, the crew members formed bonds that would carry them through what came next. Shared meals in the mess halls, workout sessions in the gyms, quiet conversations in the observation lounges. They came from different nations, different cultures, different backgrounds, but they were united by a single purpose: save those children, no matter what it cost. Lieutenant Maria Santos, a communications officer on the Defiant, started a tradition that spread through the fleet. Every evening at 2,000-hour ship time, crew members would gather and share stories about children in their lives, their own kids, nieces and nephews, students they'd taught, or in Reeves's case, the daughter he'd lost. It became a ritual, a reminder of why they were here. "We fight for Emma," Reeves would say, "and for every child like her." Intelligence briefings painted an increasingly concerning picture. Dr. Robert Kim, the fleet's xenopsychologist, analyzed Zarkonian culture based on fragments of intercepted communications and concordance observations. "They're not mindless brutes," Kim explained during one briefing. "The Zarkonians have a sophisticated society built around martial honor. They believe the strong have not just the right, but the duty to rule the weak. Taking children from conquered species isn't cruelty to them, it's education. They genuinely think they're helping by elevating these children into Zarkonian culture." Vance listened carefully, understanding the implication. "So they won't surrender easily. They'll see this as us attacking their values, not just their operations." Kim nodded. "Exactly. We're not just fighting their ships. We're challenging their entire worldview." General Stone, observing via FTL communication from Earth, provided strategic context. "The Zarkonians have won every conflict for the last 1,000 years. They've never faced real resistance because species like the Valorans disarmed centuries ago. The Concordance maintains peace through appeasement, not strength. The Zarkonians have no experience fighting an opponent that refuses to surrender." He pulled up tactical simulations. "That's our advantage. They expect surrender. They expect negotiations. They're not prepared for an enemy that will die before backing down." Vance studied the simulations, watching human and Zarkonian fleets clash in scenarios run thousands of times by Earth's tactical computers. The results were always the same. Humanity lost more ships but won more battles. The AI analysis concluded that human protective rage syndrome made them unpredictable and dangerous in exactly the ways that mattered on day 12 of the journey. Vance gathered her command staff for final planning. The tactical display showed Valora Prime and its surrounding space based on data from the original message. "We drop out of FTL here." She indicated a position at the edge of the system, approximately 500,000 kilometers from the planet. "That gives us time to assess the situation before engaging. Intelligence suggests the Zarkonians will have their collection ships in low orbit, with warships providing cover. Our priority is the children. Everything else is secondary." She looked around at her commanders: Liu, Reeves, Okonkwo, and 20 others who had volunteered to lead this impossible mission. "The rules of engagement are simple. Disable collection ships without destroying them. The children are probably on board. Defend any Valoran vessels we encounter. And if the Zarkonians fire on us, ... She smiled coldly. ... Then we show them what happens when you threaten human children. Or any children, for that matter." The final days of the journey were quiet, almost meditative. The crew prepared themselves mentally for what was coming. Some prayed to various gods. Others wrote letters to families back on Earth. Many simply sat in the observation lounges, watching the distorted stars and thinking about the children they were racing to save. Reeves found himself in the Defiant's small chapel, staring at the memorial wall where crew members had written names of people they'd lost. He added Emma's name carefully, his handwriting shaky. Next to her name, he added the names of other children lost to traffickers, victims to save during his years in protective services. "I couldn't save you," he whispered to the names. "But maybe I can save them." Behind him, Dr. Okonkwo entered quietly, adding her own daughter's name to the wall. They stood together in silence, two parents who had lost everything, preparing to risk their lives for children they'd never met. On day 14, the fleet began final preparations. Weapon systems were charged and tested. Medical bays were cleared for incoming casualties. Marines checked their gear for the 100th time. And in the command center, Admiral Vance reviewed the plan one last time. Knowing that no plan survived first contact with the enemy, At 0600 hours ship time, she made her final address to the fleet. In a few hours, we're going to drop out of FTL at Valora Prime. We don't know exactly what we'll find there. We don't know how many Zarkonian ships we'll face. We don't know if we'll survive. But we know why we're here. Somewhere on that planet, 10,000 children are waiting to be taken. Their parents are helpless. Their government has surrendered them. The galaxy has decided their suffering is acceptable. We're here to say no. It's not acceptable. It's never acceptable. And humanity will not stand by while children are sold into slavery. She paused, looking at the faces on the screens, thousands of crew members watching from 25 ships. Some of you will die today. That's not pessimism. That's reality. But you'll die doing something that matters. You'll die proving that humanity meant what we said when we unified Earth and promised to be better. You'll die showing the galaxy that compassion and courage aren't weaknesses, they're the most powerful weapons in the universe. And you'll die knowing that because you were here, because you fought. 10,000 children will go home to their families. The crew responded with silence, but it was the silence of determination, not fear. Vance nodded. All ships, prepare for FTL transition. We arrive in 2 hours. Let's go bring some children home.